Summer 2026 in Deadlock has been, if nothing else, a volatile and kind of crazy summer. We had constant changes to the game's earn, a new Rift objective. Yoshi gave us kind of the closest thing we've ever had to like a short-term roadmap or development expectations. We got fake leaks, all these different changes, tons of patch notes, and the summer's not even really halfway over yet. Hey everyone, this is Connor here at Dead Unlocked, and today I want to do kind of like a full, proper news breakdown of what we've had over the summer. I want to talk through Yoshi's statement in particularly at length and kind of put some of those expected changes into context. And then at the end of the video, I also want to talk about kind of my own personal, the last month of my own summer. We've passed the year milestone of this channel, which is pretty cool. And I've been in the midst of some crazy life changes myself. So I'll get to that at the end of the video. But like I said, let's get to the news and what's been going on this summer in Deadlock. So I want to proceed through this video a little bit chronologically, and I want to talk about kind of what has kicked off the summer, and that is really the May 22nd gameplay update that first kind of made the first significant changes to the earn. Since that update, and there have been even smaller hotfixes and even more minor patches in between, but there have been 8 minor updates since May 22nd to Deadlock. That feels significant to me, and that feels something that kind of like in the midst of the content hype and what I think fans are expecting from the game next, it can get swept under the rug. There have been 9 pretty significant updates. When Deadlock has a minor update, it really means a borderline major one. So these have been everything in between, ranging from hero balance, purely item changes, obviously, and then about 5 different iterations of the earn where, at one point it was in the middle of the map for like a day. Then you had to take it to the other side and do a team fight. Now that's just the Rift, and now we kind of have the old earn as kind of a second objective. So those have been, again, kind of the things fueling the summer development cycle for Deadlock so far. And this kind of semi-regular update fuel has been really nice throughout the summer because it actually feels like we have reached the end of a lot of leaked content. So I want to talk about a post from June 12th Minesweeper made. Again, we're talking about things that happened almost a month ago. I'm not going to talk about this a ton, but essentially Minesweeper confirmed that a lot of the leaks that he had gotten probably over the previous weeks prior to that were fake, were generated. This is one of those things I haven't spoken on yet, and I think it's actually probably the last video on the channel that I covered were some of these fake leaks. And this is something that is so frustrating to me. It honestly kind of put some of my coverage scope and perspective here on the channel. It's not that I don't want to cover leaks, and I think when you do cover a leaked piece of content, there's kind of always this implied caveat that you can't trust this as being a 100% verified thing. But still, if I'm going to bring coverage here, and I really respect the time of my viewers, I don't want to waste anyone's time with coverage that's not real or something that's not coming to the game, even if it is just a fun idea to talk about at the end of the day. It's just not something that I may do as much moving forward. You saw in the post, Minesweeper kind of laid out that this was a really elaborate plan. I was a part of the Discord server that was getting these leaks as well. And this just feels like it's wild to me. I'm a little bit speechless here and a little bit candid, but it's wild to me how much time people will waste just to generate a fake leak like this or like some of the ones we got. So in any case, I'm not sure if we should expect a wardrobe in the hideout just yet or some of the other things that we mentioned recently. But all that to say, it does make me a little bit more thankful for some of the updates we've gotten throughout June and throughout May and going into July, because it does feel like a lot of the leaks are going to be stopping moving forward. And so kind of tracking through the summer timeline here, right, we have a significant change at kind of the end of May. Minesweeper kind of confirms no leaks kind of in the middle of June. And then we get to the end of June. I think Yoshi could sense that the community was just a little bit of a frenzy, especially the diehards. There just wasn't much going on in the game outside of the kind of earn Rift volatility, which I do think is in a good spot now. But Yoshi basically laid out a little bit of a short-term roadmap that I want to read a little bit of and then kind of break down piece by piece to talk about what we've covered in the past on the channel, maybe back when leaks were at least semi-legitimate, and then maybe kind of put these into perspective, what we can actually expect from some of the changes Yoshi's talking about. So Yoshi basically said there's 3 updates or categories we are prioritizing on getting out next: a revamped matchmaking and ranked update, which it seems sort of obvious, and I think is one we talked about quite a bit. An item-focused update, which was probably the most surprising part of this to me. We're going to get some significant changes to the store, maybe some new items. There's a little bit of leaks we'll talk about there, and a large content update. This is one of those things, the large content update, we're going to spend some time talking about because this is, I think, very intentionally vague, but I do think something that will be very significant for the game's development cycle, and also just could be a really big kind of game-changing development for Deadlock. But let's kind of go piece by piece here and earnestly talk about what we at least could somewhat expect. So the first thing here is a quote revamped matchmaking / ranked update. So this is one of those things. I've made several videos about how it feels like matchmaking in Deadlock is probably one of the least nuanced parts of the game. It just feels like in a game so rich in depth and detail, why is the matchmaking so simple and straightforward right now? It's probably because devs have been trying to figure out exactly how they want you to be able to queue into games and how they want to separate the player base. I also, there's a sentiment that I'm going to kind of talk about that runs through this, that it feels like developers have been hesitant to break up the player base too much, especially for fears that, if you create 8 different ways to queue, that could make queue times really, significantly longer, especially for those kind of in more isolated elos where there's less players at their rank. So in a revamped matchmaking / ranked update paired with a large content update, you never know. I can't go a video without talking about the open beta or some kind of more significant release to jolt player base. It seems like those two things would have to go hand in hand, and so it makes sense to hear that a matchmaking ranked update would come alongside a content update. I don't think you could do it without that. But in terms of what could be in a matchmaking ranked update, I think that a lot of things that we've talked about in the past are still on the table. There are leaks that we covered in the past about like a draft board and kind of like some player intros. There's a lot of those kind of like cinematic elements and kind of the way that you kind of are funneled into a game from the hideout, through the queue process into the game. I think that whole process could do with a lot of refinement, and I think that we'll get a lot of it here. But specifically, I could really see there being a delineation between a ranked and an unranked mode. And then you would think, and then this is again something that is a bit more speculative, if there is a ranked mode, there probably would be some kind of draft system, or at least a more nuanced way to queue heroes than there is now. I love the priority system for unranked and for Street Brawl especially, but for a ranked mode, it just feels almost borderline incompatible with what that mode would be. So Yoshi, kind of speaking for the devs, did say that, quote, we aren't sure about the order these will come out yet, but we are trying to get the matchmaking update out in a few weeks to allow for things to stabilize a little before the content update is ready. Item update not really mentioned there, kind of interesting, but this was posted on June 30th and this video is being recorded on July 10th, so a few weeks probably still means that we have a week or two left. That being said, it does sound like Yoshi and the dev team want the matchmaking update first. That is going to be interesting. Again, we just talked about how you wouldn't release something like that without a content update, but if it's kind of being released as they're saying here to stabilize and then have a content update come behind it, that would make sense. Usually when these kind of updates come out, there's like 20 hot fixes, it feels like, in the week after, where there's just little bugs and everyone's gonna be updating the game a ton. We'll probably get something like that again with the matchmaking update, but again, I would expect at the very least some kind of ranked versus unranked, a better kind of more nuanced system. Maybe there's progress. I think I saw Deathy talk about in a video how you could add like, a similar like rank progression or going the opposite way, kind of status or progress bar. Could very easily see something like that being added to the game as well. All right, now I want to talk about what a quote, an item focused update could look like. This is something that, I hesitate to talk too much about leaks that we've covered in the past because of how much we've just essentially, delegitimized a lot of the recent ones. But there was a set of leaks, I think, from earlier in the spring or even in the winter, talking about this idea of like cursed items being added to the shop and them kind of being basically a new way to have modified or different items in a regular game of Deadlock. So right now, you think of like wacky and crazy items in Deadlock, you really just think of Street Brawl, and it may very well be the case that it remains that way, but there is a chance there's at least some kind of different interactions with the shop, kind of some unique, I guess new things we haven't seen before, interactions in just traditional Deadlock games. So this is something that I don't know a ton about. I think that outside of those leaks, I would just imagine that an item focused update is centered around balancing and getting some of the game's more problematic items to be a little bit less constantly problematic. Also, devs love to release 1 or 2 little new item icons and item reworks, here and there. But, an item focused update, getting maybe a ton of new icons, reworking maybe a few of the game's least bought items, could be something really interesting and would have a ton of gameplay implications if that were to be the case. And that finally sets the stage for us to talk about something else that will certainly be gameplay defining, and that is this large content update that Yoshi is talking about in this post. Again, he mentions, we didn't talk about the first part of this post all that much, but there, he's saying that he understands that the community wants information, but there are a lot of moving parts that are making it hard to predict with confidence when this will come out. So again, we talk about all the things that that could have happened to Deadlock in the last several months and maybe the last year. An open beta, big changes, the Steam machine coming out alongside it. I think all of these things are connected, and there may have been a world at one time where Deadlock devs wanted to push the game out in a kind of open beta state in June. And maybe RAM prices and things with the Steam machine really got in the way of that. It's hard to say exactly, but when we talk about this large content update, I think we have to think of it as the same level, if not more, than the Old Gods New Blood major update. So that saw obviously revamped map, the hideout, new heroes, all kinds of, insane additions. It felt like it became Deadlock 2.0. If we're going to be thinking about it the same way, I think this next, quote, large content update should be like Deadlock 3.0. So what would Deadlock 3.0 have in it? That's kind of the question I think everyone wants to know. At one point, I really thought this was PvE. It still may very well be the case, but that kind of falls into the bin of leaks that may be delegitimized at this point. It's hard to say. Even still, that would certainly fit within the mold of Deadlock. I mean, can you imagine a wave of rats? I saw, I think, an intentionally fake leak made about like fighting waves of rats. The Rat King could be a boss that's involved. With this kind of New York mythic context and setting, it really could be something awesome like that. And I would play that mode for hundreds of hours. I'm sure most people watching this video would as well. So, but again, I think we have to think of it as that kind of level, not just this is going to be a kind of basic hero update. I'm a writer, I'm a wordsmith, I'm obsessed with semantics. I think that Yoshi calling this a large content update, also in the context of like giving some like things that they want to have stabilized prior to it. Y'all are gonna hate me. I can't go video without talking about the open beta, but I don't know. I mean, when you say things like that, and again, and you want things to be polished before releasing this, yes, it could certainly just be a large update to the game, kind of a system update or something, kind of baseline, maybe something like PvE. It could also very well be the case that this is an open beta release for the game. I have to talk about it as a possibility because it frankly feels like it is one. Maybe that's in August, September, October, kind of going into the fall or into the winter of 2026. It's hard to say. I think that I wouldn't certainly not saying any kind of timeline with certainty because the lead dev of the game is also saying there's not a timeline with certainty here. So in any case, I think that really though, when you pair it with the fact that we're talking about matchmaking, items, and then a core kind of content gameplay update, and then the previous update was like map, new heroes, hideout, it feels like we will have, kind of gone through or gone over, fixed up, overhauled, whatever you want to use as a word there, just about every part of this game in the last calendar year. That to me feels like a primer for an open beta, but I'd be very interested in the comments to hear if I'm kind of the only one that thinks that these days. And just as the dev team is looking for kind of some stabilization with these updates, I'm kind of also looking for some personal stabilization of my own life. It has been a crazy month. I mentioned it's been a year since the channel's been live. I was hoping to have celebrated that a little bit more. It's been a month since my last video, and I've obviously moved and gotten a haircut, all this different stuff. I wanted to lay out a little bit of what's been going on in my own life. So if you don't care, you can just end the video. But if you do care, you can stay tuned. But earlier in June, my dog Atlas, who I've had for 10 years, got very sick. And over the course of about a week, she did pass away from cancer. And it's an autoimmune disease that shepherds can obviously, or can frequently get. Atlas has been with me. I've had her for 10 years, through college, all this kind of different stuff. And I worked from home for a lot of my career. And when you work from home with an animal, they kind of become a part of your daily cadence, and just a lot of your daily rituals can get centered around that animal. I loved Atlas, and it's been really hard to get over the loss of her. So pair that with moving and all kinds of other stuff going on in life, and you have a hellish month in your hands. So I apologize genuinely for the lack of content. I've missed making videos. I've missed kind of having a sense of normalcy in life, but it really does feel like this week I've been able to get back to some of that. Hopefully y'all are okay with the new camera and the new mic. I had to re-record a big part of this video because I did have some microphone problems, so that's fun. But I think it looks better. I'll continue to work on it. And for the OGs that miss the pink light, I've got a big studio light, like an Amaran light up here. I've got a pink setting, so I'll bring back the pink for future videos. But I did just want to give a little bit of an update. I keep saying in videos that I want to get back to like a regular recording cadence, and then things like this happen. So I'm still earnestly trying to do that. I really do appreciate the patience. Wanted to give everyone who's followed the channel for a long time an update. And thank you also for 1 year of support on the channel. It's actually crazy. So in any case, I'll dedicate this video to Atlas, and I appreciate everyone who has tuned in, all the kind words and everything else. But as always, thank you all so much for tuning in. Lots of news probably coming from Yoshi and the dev team here in the next couple weeks. So I'll be sure to keep you all updated. But until then, from our house to yours, we'll see you all next time. here at Dead Unlocked.